Check, 1, 2. This is a microphone check, real quick, just to make sure everything is groovy. For the stream is 1, 2. Hey, hey, 1, 2. Check, check, check. And absolutely, 1, 2, 2, 2. Check, 1, 2. I know it's repetitive. Sorry to hear. 1, 2. I did it for the other folks. I did a mic check. So it's hot to the box. 2, 2, 2. Hey, hey, check. 1, 2.
Couldn't you just mute it in the main?
1, 2. Hold on a sec. 1, 2. 1, 2, 2, 2. All right. Groovy. Check, check, check. Hey, hey. Everybody should be getting audio over there. 1, 2. And there should be audio to the streams as well. 2, 2, 2. Hey, hey. Check. 1, 2. 1, 2. And one, two, audio testing for the stream. Check 1, 2. All right, excellent. I'm getting a thumbs up. 1, 2, and Chris, you're getting it on the headset. 2, hey, hey.
That's why you run the mains on a matrix. No?
No.
Why?
I still don't like this. I don't like the way it's set up. It's
It's because what?
1.
Check, check. Good evening, everyone. It's so great to see such a full crowd here and so many young people. Hi, Wendy. It was my pleasure and privilege in 2016 to have the governor at my lake house in Spofford. And we just had a very good time there, good crowd just like we have here. And the one great thing that the governor has is his secret weapon, who's sitting right behind me, Mary Pat. She, one special lady. Governor Christie is a former U.S. attorney and two-term governor of New Jersey. He's a proven record of getting conservative results even in a deep blue state. In Jersey, he got the Democrat legislature to come to his way on tax cuts, pension reform, and cleaning up one of the most dangerous cities in America. And look what's happened now since it turned blue. As a presidential candidate, he is unafraid to tell the truth. He's the no BS governor, is what I call him. And even if it's not what people want to hear, we saw that on the debate stage the other night. That includes the need to move our party forward so we can defeat Biden. Our state plays a unique role, an important role in the president. This year, the stakes are higher than ever, which makes the role that New Hampshire plays in the Republican presidential primary even more important. Of all the candidates in the field, Chris Christie has demonstrated his deep commitment to New Hampshire. He's been here many times already, more than some of the other candidates. He believes in the first in the nation for New Hampshire. The nation primary, like he did 8 years ago, he's campaigning in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire way, in living rooms, in town halls, and in diners. The governor is willing to stand up here and take the hard questions, so feel free to ask him anything that's on your mind. At the end of this, he stays and answers all the questions. And it's my privilege and honor to introduce Governor Chris Christie.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you all very much. I want to thank Tom. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, all of you. Great night, huh? Wow. You know, Mary Pat and I flew back from California yesterday from the debate. We got back to New Jersey at about 8 o'clock last night, and then headed back out to the airport this morning to fly up to Boston, and then drive from Boston to Keene. And it was a great drive. It went well. We got here, and you got here, and I'm really glad that we're all here to spend time with each other tonight. Like Tom said, tonight's going to be about me answering your questions. That's the most important thing in all this. I loved doing town halls when I was governor. In my first term in New Jersey, I did over 150 of them. I did 100 here during the last primary that I was involved in 2016. I'm going to continue to do that. So we want to get to your questions. I'll just start off with a few things off the bat that are on my mind from 2 nights ago. First of all, I really think that in the next debates, if you go over, like when the bell rings, cut off your microphone, right? Like, you got enough? And right after the debate was over, I said that to Ronna Romney McDaniel, the national chairwoman. She came up to me and said, "You're the only one up there that's been involved in multiple debates. You know, what should we do to make it better?" And I said, ring the bell and give them 10 seconds after the bell rings to finish their thought. And if they keep going, shut their microphone off. You saw I didn't get involved in that back and forth on Wednesday night. I didn't. When I get asked the question, I give my answer. And I wasn't getting involved in the back and forth between, you know, everybody else and Vivek, who can't seem to shut up. You know, Nikki Haley and Tim Scott arguing about the drapes, right? The drapes at the UN ambassador's residence. You know, I don't know how that's going to make America better to resolve the argument about the drapes or about the 10-cent gas tax, whether it really went up or it didn't go up in South Carolina when she was governor 8 years ago. You know, I just stood up there, and I got to talk to Mary Pat and our oldest son, Andrew. We're out at the debate. And so during the breaks, I would go and talk to them and ask them, like, am I missing something? Or should I get in the middle of this stuff? And they're like, no, don't get in the middle of it. And I'm glad I didn't. That was my instinct, and they backed it up. You deserve to hear what we think about America and its future and who should be leading it, and not all of this, like, ridiculous back and forth that went on where everybody's trying to act like they're so tough. You know, I don't have to act like I'm tough. You know that. You already know me. And the people who are really tough don't act like they're tough. They just bring tough to the table when you need it. And one of the places where we need it is law and order in this country. We really do. The night before the debate, I'm sure all of you saw the video coming out of Philadelphia, and people just ransacking the Apple store, the Lululemon store, or these stores downtown. And at the same time this week, Target announced that they were closing their stores in Seattle, and Portland, and Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, because no one's enforcing the law. And, you know, New York also, you're right. And it is just an awful, awful situation in our country. And if we don't get it under control, it's going to spread. You know, right now we're sitting here in Keene and we think, all right, we're fairly isolated from all this. But criminals watch. They watch whether or not they're being held to account and whether the law is being enforced. And if they think it's not, they'll break the law anywhere. Anywhere there are things of value that they can steal, and we have to stop it. And I'm the only one on that stage on Wednesday night who's ever had any experience doing it. As Tom said in my introduction, I was the United States Attorney in New Jersey for 7 years in the 5th largest office in the entire country. And in New Jersey, we have great crime. We really do. We have great crime. We have all kinds of crime. We have every variety of crime. You know, people in New Jersey think that if it's criminal, we get a chance to take a crack at it. And I also appreciate the fact that we have some of the dumbest criminals in America, too, which helped me to catch a lot of them. But, you know, I learned in that job that the only way that you change what's going on is to send a very clear message with both your words and your actions when it regards keeping law and order. And you do it in a bunch of different ways, right? We did more gun cases in New Jersey, criminals illegally in possession of weapons, than any other district during our 7 years in the entire country. We don't need to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. We need to take the guns away from criminals. And if we enforce those laws, we're going to be in a lot safer place, a lot safer place. And all other types of violent crime that were going on in New Jersey, we went after. But we also went after political corruption, too. And when we talk about law and order in this country, as president, what I intend to do is to tell my attorney general in every one of these lawless cities where the state prosecutors, the county prosecutors are unwilling to do their job, then we're going to have the federal government go in there and we're going to enforce the laws against violent crime and make sure that those folks understand that there are plenty of rooms in federal prison for them, and they're not going to like it because it's not going to be close to home. When we send you to federal prison, you get sent far away, and nobody gets to come and visit you, not your old friends, not your family. They get to come if they can get on a plane or a bus or a train and get there. Believe me, that intimidates folks, and we need to do that. We can't wait for it to change at the local level. We can't hope for it to happen. Because if we do, it's going to spread to Manchester and Nashua, to Concord, and even here to Keene. It will happen. Not on the same level that it happens in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Chicago or even Boston, but it will come. And you need a president who's going to make that very clear. And by the way, if the laws apply to the violent criminals, and they should, then they have to apply to the white-collar criminals too. And you know, we can't have people in politics engaging in crime. And I can tell you, when I was U.S. Attorney, we brought 130 prosecutions in 7 years against political corruption, people in office who were corrupting their office. And we put 10%, think about this, In my 7 years, I put 10% of the state legislature in jail. 10%. Now, you all in the state legislature have too many damn people. I could have never gotten to 10% with all the people you guys have. But we had 120 state legislators, and during my 7 years, I put 12 of them in jail. And then I became governor. You can imagine how I was welcomed to the state capitol after having done that. But here's what they knew. They knew I was going to put up with any of that. See, the way you act sets the tone for everything. And that's why I'm doing the things I'm doing in this race. If we say we're the party of law and order, then we got to be for law and order from everyone. From everyone. And there are no excuses because, well, we like them or because they're in our party. No, if you're breaking the law, you need to be held to account. And so first, law and order is incredibly important. Second, we have to make sure that we get the debt in this country under control. And there was not enough conversation about that on Wednesday night. I mean, think about what's gone on. Really, ever since Barack Obama got in office. It started with him, and he started running up $400 and $500 billion a year deficits, adding to the national debt. And little did we know that when I was standing on these stages for debates here in New Hampshire and other places in 2015 and 2016, and Donald Trump said that he was going to balance the budget in 4 years. He was a businessman. He had to balance his books as a businessman, and he was going to balance it in 4 years. And in 4 years, he added $7 trillion to the national debt, more than any president in 4 years in our history. And Joe Biden is apparently jealous of that. Because now, in not quite 3 years, he's added another $5 trillion to the national debt. And if he keeps at that pace through the time that he ends his first term, he'll beat Donald Trump's record. $33 trillion in debt this country is in. $33 trillion. Every child that's born in this country right now starts off with nearly $200,000 in debt. That's their share of the national debt. That's the gift we give them because of our unwillingness to stand up and do the right thing. And let me tell you, in New Jersey, I inherited something pretty ugly. You know, I had a Democratic predecessor who I defeated for re-election, and he left me an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. And we got in there. I started right from the beginning with something that's called zero-based budgeting. So let me just make it really an easy explanation. It means every year you got to sing for your supper. You do not come in assuming that what you spent last year is where you start and you go up from there. Every year you start at zero and you have to make the case to the governor as to the money that you need to spend and why. When we did that the first year, we eliminated 683 programs, eliminated them, and were able to balance the budget without raising taxes on a huge deficit. On a deficit that was, more than a third of the overall budget. And so it can be done. Now, let me be clear. If I become president, we're not going to fix it in 4 years. I'm not going to lie to you like Donald Trump did. It can't get fixed in 4 years. The hole is too big. But in 8 years, we can get it moving in the right direction, and we have to. Because I want you to think about this. With interest rates where they are now, next year, we're going to pay $1 trillion on the national debt. Our interest payments to the people who hold our bonds is going to be $1 trillion. Before we spend a nickel on anything, on the national defense of the country, on education, on health care, on Social Security, before we spend a nickel on any of that, we have to first spend $1 trillion to pay off the people who loaned us money. We can't sustain that forever. Not even close. Third, we need to fix the immigration system in this country. And it's not just about the border. It only starts there. So let's start there. Day one, I'll sign an executive order that sends the National Guard to the southern border to partner with Customs and Border Patrol officers to do two things: stop the flow of illegals coming into this country and slow the flow of fentanyl coming into this country. We need to do both, not one or the other, but both. And it is incredibly important that when we capture these folks who are coming over, that we renew our commitment to send them back. We have to send them back, because if they're applying for asylum, that's fine. If they want political asylum, go back, fill out your application, we'll consider it, and if we grant it, you come. What we do now, under Joe Biden, is they come over, they say they want asylum, they fill out the form, and then we release them and say, come back for your hearing.
In 7 years.
Yes, in 7 years, and by that time, they are long gone into this huge continental country. It makes no sense for us to do that. But don't let any candidate get away with just telling you, we're going to be tougher on the border. That's easy. It's easy to say. It's not easy to do, but it's easy to say. But that's not our only problem. Do you know we have 6 million vacant jobs in this country? 6 million vacant jobs. People who are advertising right now to hire someone can't find anyone. If we're going to grow our economy, and that's the only way we get rid of that debt over the long term, is to grow our economy, we need people working and paying taxes and filling those jobs. And we need people to immigrate to this country to do it. Because those 6 million jobs still being open in this economy tells you that it's one of two things. Either those are jobs that Americans can't do, or those are jobs that Americans won't do. But either way, we've got to figure out a way to fill those jobs. So we need to fix an immigration system and make it a merit-based immigration system. We need to look at it and say, okay, where do we need help? If it's in tech, let's go get people from other countries who are good at that. If it's manufacturing, let's get other people who are good at that. If it's farming, ranching, let's get people who come and want to do that. Right? Nursing. There's just a ton of problems here that we can get people to come over to do, but let's do it orderly, legally, and let's do it based on merit, not just who can swim the best over the Rio Grande. Right? That doesn't make any sense. And our country, the good news is that people still want to come here. In fact, people are dying to get here. This is still the place where everybody in the world who has a dream about what they want their life to become thinks they can make that dream come true here. We never want to lose that. We don't want to just become another country in the roll call in the United Nations. We're the United States. And so let's do it the right way. But nobody in this race, other than me, is talking about this. When you heard us talk about immigration on Wednesday night, you got like Ron DeSantis saying, let's shoot them stone cold dead when they come over the border, right? Like, okay, but what's the next answer? So you got a bunch of dead bodies on the border. How are we growing our economy? How are we making this a better place? We are not growing this economy by sitting and letting 6 million jobs stay open. Well, there's all, of course, but do you hear Governor DeSantis talking about agricultural visas? Do you hear him talking about work visas? Do you hear him talking about any of that? All people want to say is be tough on the border. I agree, but you got to go to the next step, because if you don't, what we're doing is we're deceiving you and giving you the answer that emotionally you want to hear, but won't fix the problem. And haven't we had enough of that? I mean, seriously, we have had more than enough of that garbage, of people telling you what, look, we saw it 8 years ago. Okay? We saw it 16 years ago with Barack Obama. Right? 16 years ago, he said, if you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. That was the first big lie. That was the first one, because we all worried that it might not be true, And then he proved that it wasn't true. And he started to make the American people cynical, even more cynical about their government than they were before. And then we had Donald Trump come in and say he's going to balance the budget in 4 years. They had $7 trillion to the debt. He said he was going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And he had Republican Congress his first 2 years, and he didn't do it. And you know why he didn't do it? Because he couldn't stop beating the bejesus out of John McCain. Right? Abusing John McCain, a national hero in this country. You can agree with the late Senator McCain on some things and disagree with others, but no one should disagree that the guy was a hero. And Trump couldn't stop beating him up. And then guess what? Obamacare came down to one vote, and it was John McCain's. And I remember sitting watching that night with Mary Pat, and she said, well, McCain's been against Obamacare since the beginning. He ran against Obama. He's going to vote to get rid of it. I said, no, he's not. For those of you, and I know Senator McCain spent a lot of time up here over the years, all the way back to 2000. And for those of you who got a chance to get to know him, you knew he wasn't giving Trump that vote after the way that Trump treated him and the things he said about Trump, that Trump said about him. And he said, no way. And so now we still have Obamacare, right? We still have Obamacare. Trump promised us that. He also promised to build a big, beautiful wall, since we were talking about immigration, across the entire border of the U.S. and Mexico, and Mexico was going to pay for it. Now, what happened? In 4 years, we got 52 miles of new wall. 52 miles. Now, he says if he gets reelected now, he'll finish the wall. At that pace, he'll need 110 more years as president to finish the wall. And by the way, Mexico hasn't paid us the first peso towards that wall. And you know why? Because they were never going to. But he was going to be such a great negotiator and persuader that he was going to be able to convince Mexico to pay for a wall on our side of the border. I stood on the stage 8 years ago and thought, no one's going to really believe this, are they? This is crazy. People believed it, right? Well, please remember what my mother told me growing up. Whenever she thought I wasn't telling her exactly the truth, she would say to me, Christopher, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, we are in the same position, everybody. In the same position. And we can't put up with this any longer. I'm not always going to give you the answer you like, but I'm going to give you the answer I know I can do. And maybe we need to get back to that in politics. Maybe you can't have everything you want. I know growing up, I couldn't have everything I wanted, and I doubt anybody in this room got everything they wanted growing up. Why the hell should we think our country and our government's going to be able to give that to us as we get older? They're not. But come every 4 years, they'll tell you that they will. And that's why I'm happy when Tom introduces me as the no BS candidate. Doesn't mean I'm always going to get standing ovations, but I will tell you, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to either do it or I'm going to die trying. And I'll end with this and then go to your questions. We need to win. We need to win. Look at what Joe Biden is doing to this country. And he's doing it in absentia. He's not even really there. I mean, let's think about it, guys. Like you watch him on TV, you listen to him. He can't make arguments for his policies. You barely ever see him. When you do, he doesn't look like he's up to the job. Let's face it. Father Time always wins, right? No, Father Time is undefeated. It just matters what pace Father Time goes at. And for all of us, the pace is different. I have a 90-year-old dad who still drives, still does his own shopping, dating a younger woman, for goodness sake, and having a great time for himself. How old is she? All right, I'm going to tell you, he's probably watching. 74. Let me just say, he's doing just fine. And, you know, age has affected him differently. I lost my mom at 71, right? Age affects everybody differently, but we can see with our own eyes. That's why when Nikki Haley says she wants a competency test for everybody in public office over 75, let me tell you what the competency test is. Right here, your eyes. Do any of you need a test, right, to look at someone and go, maybe not for President of the United States, right? I don't think we need a test. We're the test if we're paying attention. We're the test. And so we need to beat Joe Biden. There's only one person in this race. In fact, there's only one person in America outside the state of Delaware who's ever lost to Joe Biden, and that's Donald Trump. And the fact is, if we go back and do the same thing we did 4 years ago, we're going to wind up with 4 more years of Joe Biden, but worse, we're probably going to wind up with some years of Kamala Harris. And I have to tell you the truth. You know, no vice president ever looks great, right? It's just the nature of the job. But she's setting new standards. And by the way, Joe Biden was the one who said she was going to go down and fix the border. That's gone real well. Maybe she didn't even want that assignment, but when you're vice president, you take what you can get. I'm the only person on that stage that's ever beaten a Democratic incumbent. You look at last night, or governed in a blue state. You look at that stage Wednesday night, they're all from red states. Washington, D.C. is not a red state, everybody. It is hand-to-hand, near-death political combat. You got to know how to fight, and you've got to know how to make a deal. You got to know how to do both. And with all due respect to Governor DeSantis running around talking about everything he did in Florida, well, let me tell you something. If I had had a Republican legislature for 2 weeks as governor of New Jersey, I would have done as much as DeSantis has done in 5 years. Doesn't take a lot when you got a Republican legislature. Nikki Haley had a Republican legislature. Doug Burgum has a Republican legislature. Tim Scott's been never anything but a Republican legislature. You look up and down that row, who do you have confidence in that knows how to go there and get the job done? Every day of every week of every year that I was governor, I had a 10-vote minority in the Senate and a 16-vote minority in the House. That's not encouraging when you're the Republican governor of a blue state. But as Tom was talking about, we got things done. We cut taxes. We eliminated the estate tax. There's no estate tax in New Jersey. You die in New Jersey, you're not paying any state estate tax. We made pension reform that saved $120 billion. And when Camden, New Jersey was the most dangerous city in America, so I'll end where I started. When I became governor, they were the most dangerous city in America. I went down and spoke to the police force down there and asked them to change what they were doing because it obviously wasn't working. The unions told me to go to hell. And so you know what I did? I fired the entire Camden City Police Department. Not one of them. All 325 of them in one fell swoop. And what happened? We hired an entirely new police force at the county level to cover the city of Camden. For the same amount of money I was paying for 325, I got 410. And we trained them in community policing. And what's that mean, that phrase? I got them mostly out of cars and put them on bikes and on foot so that people could see them. And we trained them in violence de-escalation. So that we come into a situation, they know how to stop the violence, not to increase it. What's happened in Camden in the 10 years since we did that? The murder rate is down 75% in Camden, and the violent crime rate is down by 2/3 of all violent crimes. And there are nowhere near a list anymore of the most violent cities in America, the most dangerous ones. You need to know what you're doing. It's not just about talking, it's about executing. And New Hampshire is the place to do that. You have the unique opportunity to do it. And we're going to talk more about that tonight. So I will stop and take your questions now. Now, look, just raise your hand. We're going to get a microphone over to you so everybody here can hear you and so that the cameras can hear you as well. And we will go from there. Any question is on the table. Whatever you want to ask, I'm going to try to answer. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know. And the next time I come to Keene, I'll answer it for you, or I'll send you an email in between now and then. But you're not going to get any BS answers tonight where I'm trying to pretend that I know something that I don't know. If I know it, I'll answer it. If I don't, I won't. Let's start with that lady right back there in purple.
Yes, only 28% of Republicans want us to continue funding the war in Ukraine. How much lower does that number have to go before you will consider what we want more than you consider TV pundits like your TV wife, Donna?
Well, geez, my wife here is very offended by the characterization of my TV wife. But no, I'm not considering that. I'm considering history. And I want you to consider history too. The last time we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe, the last time we did it, that cost us tens of billions of dollars and 500,000 dead Americans. I don't want that to happen to this country again. And I am absolutely convinced that Vladimir Putin isn't stopping at Ukraine, especially if you hand it to him. He's already taken Georgia. He took Crimea. And everybody thought, when Georgia got taken, Obama told us he'll stop there. Then they took Crimea, and Obama said they'd stop there. And he didn't. And now here he is, taking the rest of Ukraine. I understand that it is a burden on the American people to have to do this. I get it. But the burden is not going to get less, it's going to be greater. And by the way, if we don't do it and we don't take leadership in the world, China will. And they are. Because who do you think is paying for that war for Russia? It's not Russia. It's China. China's paying for it. And guess who else is in the party now? Now we saw Putin went over and saw Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And is getting missile technology from him. Oh, let me tell you who else is in the band. Iran. The Ayatollah and the mullahs are giving sophisticated drone technology to the Russians to kill Ukrainians. It is not convenient, ever, to be the freest and richest nation in the world. But if we want to stay the freest and richest nation, and we don't want to have to give another 500,000 or more American lives to keep it that way, it's a pretty good investment, in my view, to spend less than 5% of our one-year military budget. That's what we've spent so far in Ukraine. Less than 5% of what we spend in 1 year on the Pentagon. And we have degraded, the Ukrainians have degraded the Russian army by 50%. The tanks, the artillery that they're spending, they are shooting 60,000 artillery shells a day into Ukraine. They're not going to be able to keep that up. And we need, in my view, to give the Ukrainians what they need to be able to win the war. Because if they don't, and if we don't, and if we walk away now, we'll be fighting the Chinese in Taiwan. And you may be against going to Taiwan, too. And if you are, I want you to remember this. You have a cell phone? Okay. You have a thermostat at home that controls the heat and the cooling in your house? Right, yeah, right? We've got every one of the things that we use when we start our cars, no matter where we go and what we do, has semiconductors. And 2/3 of the world's semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan. So here's the question. Do we want the Communist Party of China to be controlling who gets those semiconductors? Because let me tell you where we'll be. The back of the line. And then everyone's going to say, how the hell did the government let this happen? I can't start my car. I can't heat or cool my house. I can't work my cell phone. I can't communicate with my kids who are far away because now the Chinese have all the semiconductors. And then everybody will be complaining about why we dropped the ball on it. These are hard choices. And if we give up leadership in the world, let me tell you what's going to happen, everybody. The vacuum will not remain. The Chinese will fill it. And remember what they do to their own people. If you practice religion in China, you get sent to a concentration camp. If you want to have more than one child, you can't. There's mandatory sterilization after you have one child. This is the culture they'll bring to the rest of the world, if we let them. We've never let them do that, and I don't think we should now. And they're the people funding this war. So the question is, do we want to help the Ukrainians do it now, or do we want to pay for it and do it ourselves later? Because one way or another, that's coming. And I think we have to stop it. And I know there are people who disagree with me. But leadership is not about reading polls. Leadership is about changing polls. Leadership is about getting up and saying, we don't have a referendum on everything in this country. We elect leaders who tell us which way we think they should go. And you want to get rid of them, you get rid of them. But I'm certainly not going to stand up here and say, oh, I read a poll that says this, therefore I'm going to change my mind if I believe with everything I've done and read and studied that this is true. And the last thing I'll tell you is this. I went to Ukraine. If you see what's going on over there, it is breathtaking. I went to the city of Bucha, which is one of the first ones that was invaded by Russia. I got toured around by the mayor. He took me down the street, houses right on top of each other, where the Russian army went from house to house, went into the houses, pulled out any males that were in the house, took them to the sidewalk while they were alive, gouged out their eyes, cut off their ears, and then shot them in the back of the head and killed them. And then they went back into the house and raped all the women, starting with the youngest, so that the older women would have to see what was being done to their daughters, their granddaughters, their nieces. Then they loaded all the dead bodies into pickup trucks and drove them to the top of the city where their church was and dumped the dead civilian bodies. These are not soldiers. Dumped the dead civilian bodies behind the church to show the rest of the people in town what would happen if you resisted. If this is the kind of society we want, if this is the kind of world we're willing to tolerate, America's never been willing to tolerate that. And I don't think we should now. So I know where the polls are in this, at least some of them. But I think there's a lot of the American people who believe that this world is a better place when America leads than when America stands on the sidelines. And I don't want any president to have to send our men and women to Taiwan or any place else or back to a shooting war in Europe because we didn't help the Ukrainians do this now. So that's where I stand on it. He's getting the microphone for you.
Thank you.
Last time I saw you in Keene, actually I was not encouraged to get my kids involved in our business. I thought I'd give you an update because of your encouragement and the family things. We did have our family come in. They've been a multi-generational, and it's going quite well.
Great.
But the question, I'm also an employer, and we have a young man that worked for us that was shipped off. He was a part of the New Hampshire National Guard. They shipped, I believe, 290 to Syria. And he's very excited because he is shooting HIMARS at Russians. Concerning. Got a couple young kids, lives in Asheville, very concerning. We have another young man that worked for us that got shipped out. He's part of the reserves. He got shipped out on very short notice to go down south of the border to help the Border Patrol people. And he was there a month. He got offered, he was told to go home, got offered a big sign-on bonus with El Paso Police Department and double pay what he had here, and he is now emigrated to El Paso. I'm not real happy about the government relative to us as an employer supporting the military for operations that seem to be amiss. And I don't know why I have a 30-year-old kid in Syria firing HIMARS. I don't understand it. I don't get it. So anyway, thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you. And
Just like your comments about tonight.
sure, I will. Look, on the southern border thing, let's start there. That's going to be the price that we're all going to have to pay to secure the southern border because of what's happened and what we've permitted to happen over the last 16 years. And I hear more about that than any other issue as I travel around, not only New Hampshire, but South Carolina and other states where I'm going to campaign now, is that people want that problem fixed. And I'd add to the problem, because I'd send more National Guard down there to try to fix that problem. Because if you look at what's happened in this country and just look at near where I live in New York City, the number of migrants that have now been shipped there. Well, why were they shipped there? Because they said they were a sanctuary city. Now it's costing you something, right? And they're spending billions of dollars on those folks. So I would add to your problem the second part. On the first part, I think that mission is long ago over and should be over. And I wouldn't be sending those people there.
We have 290 of our citizens are there now.
I understand that. And to me, this is the way I look at it. I think that mission over there is over. That was initially done because of ISIS. And look, 8 years ago, ISIS was a significant problem, a significant terrorist problem that was also trying to execute terrorist attacks right here in our country. But that problem for the moment has been solved. And by the way, to be fair, no matter how great those 290 men and women are, 290 are not going to stop what needs to be stopped over there if things started to bubble up again. So I think sometimes what happens is people don't want to leave because they're afraid if something goes wrong, they'll get blamed for having left. That's not a good enough reason to me to take American men and women and send them to a far-flung spot in the world. You've got to know exactly what the mission is, define it, accomplish it, and come home. And so on the second part of it, I'm telling you I would make it worse. On the first part of it, I would get them home. All right. Yes, sir, in the aisle here. He's coming up right behind you with a microphone. There you go, sir.
Energy underpins so much of our economy, but the Biden administration's policy seems to be feckless. What would you do differently?
Almost everything. But let me be very specific. First off, I was standing next to Governor Burgum at the debate on Wednesday night. North Dakota is one of our biggest energy-producing states. And one of the things he told me during the commercial break was that within 6 months of when Biden became president, they were producing 1 million barrels of oil less a day in North Dakota than they had been 6 months earlier because of Joe Biden's radical policies. So in other words, we're off buying oil from the Iranians, from other folks in the Middle East, the Saudis, the Emiratis, and he was even talking to the Venezuelans to try to get oil and stopping us from producing 1 million barrels a day more just in North Dakota. So first thing I would do is to lift all of those restrictions off of domestic oil and gas production. Let's go. Let's get energy independent again. Secondly, we have to find other ways to produce energy as well. And I'll tell you this, and probably a lot of people don't know this, but New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country. You probably knew that if you ever came to visit, because you're walking down the street, you're bumping into somebody all the time. But what you probably didn't know was 53% of our electricity in New Jersey is produced by nuclear power. 53%. Produced safely in the most densely populated state in America. If you could do it in the most densely populated state in America, why aren't we doing it in every state? It's clean, it doesn't add to the problems that we have by carbon, and it's safe, and it's much safer now than it was 40 years ago. The technology now is amazing, and Governor Kemp in Georgia just opened the first new nuclear power plant in decades in this country, in the state of Georgia, and I'm glad he did, and we need to do more of that. And as president, what I would do is to expand that, because if we can take the load off of oil and gas for producing electricity by doing it with nuclear, then we have more of that to produce gasoline, and we can help keep our prices down. The third thing I would do, and I have no problem with wind and solar. When I was governor, we had the second largest solar producing state in the country. But it's this much. If the technology's not good enough yet to take up what oil, gas, and nuclear can do. We need that to make sure when you flip the switch, the light goes on. When you want to cool your house or heat your house, that you can do so. And also, on natural gas, which we have an abundance of in this country, we should be building pipelines. And the fact that we don't have gas pipelines that come here to New Hampshire or the rest of New England, because a radical liberal governor in New York won't let pipelines go from Pennsylvania to New England, is outrageous. I built 2 new pipelines when I was governor of New Jersey. And guess what that meant? That to heat our homes in New Jersey with natural gas became much less expensive. So we need to build more pipelines. And certainly the pipelines that have gotten stopped, like the Keystone Pipeline and others that are bringing energy from Canada, from a friendly neighbor, are things that we should want to have done. Lastly, one of the most cynical, awful things that Biden did was to deplete the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to bring down prices for a summer driving season. And now it's depleted by 2/3. And now gas prices are and oil prices are so high again, you're not going to want to buy the oil right now to refill it because it'd be too damn expensive. So he's leaving us exposed. We have a crisis. We don't even have the reserves we normally had in order to be able to help people in a real crisis, because his crisis were his poll numbers. And that's why he did that. So once we were able to increase, and we could do it quickly. Look, if Doug Burgum's state went down 1 million barrels in 6 months, then go back up 1 million barrels in 6 months. And we can do that all over the country. We could do it in Texas. We could do it with natural gas in Pennsylvania. We could do it in other places that can finally give folks a chance to be able to buy things at an affordable price. And just to make you feel a little bit better in New Hampshire, when we were in California for the debate, I was driving in Los Angeles. You know what a gallon of regular gas is in Los Angeles right now? $6.59 a gallon. $6.59 a gallon for regular gas. Hey, Mary Pat and I were in the car. We would drove by this gas station. I'm like, can you believe that? And if you're fancy and you want to buy premium, it's $7 a gallon. So we can't have that spread across the entire country. If they want to keep doing that crazy stuff in California, let them, because it's crazy out there. And that's what these policies lead to. So that's what I would do on energy. Take the caps off of oil and natural gas production that Biden put on artificially. Build more pipelines so we can get natural gas to places like here in New England to bring your heating costs down. Expand nuclear all over the country to have a reliable and clean way to generate electricity for everybody that's reliable. And then refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve when the price gets to a reasonable level so we don't get caught with our pants down if there's a crisis. And do those things, I think we'll be in much better shape here. We'll probably be back down to $2.25 gasoline and be in a place where that tax gets off the American people. Joe Biden talks about Bidenomics. Yeah, Bidenomics is $6.59 gas in California. Not good for anybody. So that's what I would do on energy. And I think it's not only smart, it's doable. It's something that can happen relatively quickly on the natural gas and oil side, and we should get moving on the nuclear side. That'll take longer. But even with that longer term project, if you could get to a place where every state was producing half their electricity with nuclear, think about how much cleaner the environment would be and how much cheaper our costs would be. Be significant. So that's what I would do. All right. Here you go. Let's just get the microphone first. There you go.
I'm so happy you have been a successful prosecutor and have prosecuted the elite. I think you have the most experience of all the candidates. My question is, should Dr. Fauci be prosecuted?
You know, I want to be careful about how I answer that question because I don't know enough to know. I certainly think that there's plenty there to look at and to investigate, for sure. But because I was a prosecutor, I'm not going to go, yeah, throw the bastard in jail. You know, like, I think that the justice system in this country means that everybody deserves due process. And let's have an investigation. Let's see exactly what he knew. It certainly seems to me there's some stuff he didn't tell us, at a minimum, about what we were investing in overseas, in terms of where COVID started, and then some of the decisions that he made, or recommendations he made to President Trump on decisions that were made during COVID that were not good for our country, short-term or long-term. And if that was being motivated in some part by him making a profit off of some of that, well, then he's got some problems. But I don't want to go off, you know, half-cocked here and say like, oh, yeah, let's just throw the guy in jail. I won't do that with anybody, except for Bob Menendez, who I know is a crook, by the way. Because I'm from New Jersey, I know him, I know he's a crook. He needs to go to jail. But other than that, that's the only place where I'll make an exception. But that's called the hometown exception, because I know. I think we got to be careful about that, but do it right. In the same way, when Hunter Biden's stuff started, because I see you're non-Binary, I like that shirt. When the Hunter Biden stuff started, I was saying for 3 weeks before his plea hearing that no honest judge would ever let him enter that plea. And I had people on television saying to me, you're crazy. It's a Delaware judge. She's going to enter that plea. And how about, after 5 questions, she said, I'm not doing this, because it was a rigged deal. It was a rigged deal. And guess what? Now he's indicted for those gun charges that carry 10-year minimum sentences, 10-year mandatory minimums. In one of the most ironic things you'll ever hear, do you know who sponsored the bill to make that crime a 10-year minimum? His father. His father sponsored that bill to make it a 10-year minimum to lie on a federal application for a gun. And that investigation needs to continue into not only the taxes. Like, look, I did these cases, okay? Millions of dollars of unreported income doesn't turn out to be a misdemeanor. That's a felony. And I suspect he's going to get indicted for that too. And we also need to know, you know, what he was getting all that money from foreign companies and foreign governments for. And I believe in our justice system. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but we've got to give it a chance to work. And I'm proud of the fact that that judge rejected that plea agreement. That tells you that the system's not completely broken, because she was a Delaware judge, and there's no way she became a judge in Delaware without Joe Biden signing off on her. Nothing happened in Delaware without Joe Biden signing off on it. And she did her job the right way. She listened to the facts and she said, this is unfair and I'm not going to do it. And so I want Fauci to get a completely fair look. And if it turns out that he committed crimes, nobody should be above the law in this country. Nobody. And no matter what level of service you may have provided at one time, and Dr. Fauci provided years of service to the country, but if you put yourself ahead of the country and you broke the law in the process, that's what you have to do. When I was doing those prosecutions you referenced in New Jersey, you know, I sent Charles Kushner to jail. He was the second richest man in New Jersey. Had the ability to hire any lawyers he wanted and as many lawyers as he wanted. But when you break the law, you got to be held accountable. And it's got to apply to everybody, from the President of the United States right on down. Because if not, then we're a country of men and women and not a country of laws. And I don't want to live in a country of men and women. I want to live in a country of laws. Because that's where you get freedom from. That's where you get liberty from. Not from any one person. We don't have a king or a queen. And we left that, as I recall. So if Fauci did something wrong, I'd be first in line to say, put him in jail. And when you look at my record in New Jersey, whether it was Republicans or Democrats, the first case I did as U.S. Attorney was against the Republican mayor of Paterson, New Jersey. The second case I did was against the Republican frontrunner for the United States Senate. But they were all taking bribes. So I mean, I don't care whether you got an elephant or a donkey. You're taking a bribe, you need to go to the can. That's it. So we'll do the same thing with him. All right, let's go to the gentleman in the back there.
A lot of people are dying in this country because of the fact that the military-grade weapons are very plentiful. What are you going to do about that? I'm real concerned that we should ban that weapon. There's no need for that weapon in the hands of citizens in this country.
Well, this is always the toughest question that I get at a town hall meeting. It just is. So let me tell you my answer. First is that we've had a lot of conversation in this country lately, and rightfully so, about freedom of speech and about whether or not freedom of speech should be able to be restricted in the ways that it's been restricted based upon political or partisan reasons. And the reason why so many people get offended by that, whether you agree with the speech or not, is because we believe in our Bill of Rights and we believe in the things that our founders set up as our rights that are given to us by God, not by any one person. The Second Amendment isn't an inferior amendment. So I think if we're going to impinge upon any of the amendments, we better be very careful about how we do it. Because the slight impingement we might be in favor of, there might be a much more severe impingement that another person who gets into power might be okay with. And then we say, well, wait a second, you shouldn't be able to do that. And they go back and say, well, you did this, so we can do what we want to do. So I'm very concerned about making sure we protect the Second Amendment and people's right to own guns. Well, let me finish. Hold on, okay? Secondly, when I look at the statistics on those weapons, and I've been asked this a few times now, so I went back and looked. Let's say we got rid of, first of all, let's say you could agree on what an assault weapon is. No, it's no, well, if you look at the statute, it's not. And different administrations have defined it in different ways. But let's just use an AR-15, okay, since that's a term everybody knows. Those weapons, when you look at the killings and even the mass shootings in this country, have amounted for about 3% of the deaths. So if I'm going to do something where I'm going to impinge upon people's constitutional rights, I'm going to want it to be effective. And if we think that this is no longer going to happen because we get this out of people's hands, the statistics tell us that that's not true. Third, if you look at the people who are committing these crimes with those weapons, those folks have significant mental health issues that go along with it also. And we need to be able to deal with that as a country and not stigmatize it as we have. You know, if you look at the shootings that went on up in Connecticut, the weapons weren't purchased by the people who committed the crimes. They were purchased by people who were perfectly legal to buy those weapons, and then they were stolen by people inside their own home and were taken. No, and you know what? I understand what you're saying, but some weapons would have been there. If we ban that one, people are going to buy other ones. And I'm just not in favor of coming in and saying that if I ban this one set of weapons, here we go, everybody's safer. The statistics don't tell me that, and I don't believe it. And I know that there are people who disagree. And it looks from the look on your face like you're one of them, okay? So I get that. But I don't want to start going down the road of banning certain weapons and then saying that's going to fix the problem, and it doesn't. And I've now given a slippery slope that I've created for other ones to be taken as well. If you look at the number of weapons that are out there in this country, let's say we banned all of them tomorrow. All of them. Not just AR-15s, not just anything else you might call an assault rifle, but let's ban all of them. Because 97% of the murders that are committed with guns in this country are committed by handguns. So let's get rid of all of them. If we did, we'd still have 350 million guns in circulation in this country. So then what do I have to do? So then I come to a town hall meeting 4 years later and they say, good job, Mr. President, banning the guns so no one can buy them anymore. But now, since we have 350 million of them out there, now you got to go get those. And now, then I'm going into people's homes and saying, okay, yeah, I know you legally bought this at one time, but now we don't feel so good about this, so I'm going to take your guns now. That's my concern about it. I give you that answer knowing that it is not sufficient, but it's the best I can come up with.
So what would you do?
What I would do, so I was going to get to, no.
Why not something common sense? Why is it always the NRA says absolutely nothing and the politicians say absolutely nothing? As a daughter of a teenager and a niece who actually had shooter drills and actually had people that come into the schools, what would you do?
Well, I,
90% of people who have guns and are part of the NRA do believe in the background checks. Why aren't we pushing that?
well, first of all, there are extensive background checks that are already done in most of the states in this country. And so that's the first thing. Extensive background checks are done in most of the states in this country already. But I was going to get to what else I would do, but since you asked, I'm going to now give you that. There's a few things. First off, I started to talk about mental health treatment, and we need to do much more of that. Secondly, we have to provide greater security at schools. It's an unfortunate thing, but it is true. Look, I see you roll your eyes on that one, but you know, if
Take my daughter's freedom away.
no, hold on.
You'll give somebody with guns freedom, but you'll take my kids' freedom away.
What freedom am I taking away by having greater security?
You can't have actual in and out of school. When I was a kid, I was able to walk in and out of school. I could walk
Okay, so well, let me ask you this then. So you're saying that if I banned AR-15s,
No, I'm not saying ban anything. I'm saying do a better job under gun control. So
Well-
what is your idea to improve gun control?
well, look, I think that what we're doing already in terms of background checks is enormous in this country. And if you go and try to buy a gun, and you have to go through, now it depends on state to state, but in most states in this country, there are pretty extensive background checks that are done and waiting periods. And we have red flag laws. No, I didn't say everywhere. I said in many states we have them. I'm from Florida. Right. Well, look, let's well, all right. So now, let's get to that first. All right. So let's get. Hold on now. We're starting to get out of control here, because now I'm trying to answer 3 different people's questions at the same time, and I'm from New Jersey and got a big mouth, so I can do it. But if I get past 3, it gets hard. All right. So on Florida, what do you think was going on there? That was a political move. Okay, that was a political move by your governor to try to get as far to the right as he could on gun issues before he's getting ready to run for president. Because in his first number of years as governor, he never did any of that. It was only right at the end when he's getting ready to run for president. So you're never going to take politics out of everything either. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's the truth. Let me answer your question, which is a little bit like your question and somewhat like his question. We have in New Jersey, where I'm from, we have the second strictest gun laws in the country by any evaluation. And we still have an enormous problem. What the problem we need to get to, and part of what I started to do as governor, but couldn't get as much support as I wanted to, even from Democrats, was to say when people speak out violently, when they say that they're going to shoot this person, attack this school, I got some of this, but not all of it, to have involuntary commitment for a period of time for those people who appear to have a mental health issue, and we need to get them off the streets for a period of time. In New Jersey, it was 48 hours to make an assessment of them and have a cooling off period. I think we should do that more broadly in the country, because I do think if you look at most of the mass shootings, not every shooting that goes on, because there's lots of motivations for the different shootings that go on. But for most of the mass shootings, and certainly for most of the school shootings that you were referencing, the people who execute that are deeply disturbed. They're not people who are going in there. I mean, you just had this one recently at University of Virginia, where, was it Virginia or at UNC, where there was a grudge against a particular professor and he went in, but then he just shot the one guy. He had as target, that was it. The mass shootings that we're seeing are usually from really deeply disturbed folks. We need to intervene beforehand, and we need to get much more aggressive on the mental health treatment that we make available to people and that we make mandatory for people who speak out in that way. Now, on school security, you can't go in anywhere anymore. Like I love the woebegone days that you and I both had when, you know, we just would skip on into school and skip on out of school and never have to worry about these things. But we do. The reality is we do have to worry about them now. You can't go anywhere. You can't go into a football stadium without going through a magnetometer. You can't go through all these other places. I'm not saying we should have those at every school, but there are ways that we can secure the schools better, and I think we should have security officers in schools. And I think that should be part of what we do from a law enforcement perspective, because in the end, what we care about the most is not whether they can skip into school and skip out of school feeling like they don't have a care in the world, but that they actually walk in and are able to walk out, and they're alive. And we had to deal with that problem of not being able to do it. The third thing I would say I would do is I don't have a problem with folks who have been engaged in violent acts before not being able to have guns. If you've shown a willingness to commit violent acts against folks, then you give up some of your rights when you do that. When someone commits a felony, we take away the right to vote. We take away certain very precious rights. And so when you commit violent acts, and this is often in the case of domestic violence and other things, we need to restrict those people's ability to be able to continue to engage in having weapons. I think those are common sense things based on experience that could let us do it without also unnecessarily violating people's Second Amendment rights, because it's their act and their conduct that had their right violated, not just some theory that we might have about which guns are most dangerous or which ones are better or worse. So these are all answers that are imperfect, because I don't think there's a perfect way to solve this problem. Because as I started to say, if we go down the road of banning, confiscating, I don't think we're going to get it all anyway. And by the way, the people who will have it the most will be the people who are criminals and who don't follow the law anyway and are just playing the angles to hope that they never get caught. And by the way, that's where a lot of these guns are already in the hands of now, which was part of the problem I talked about right off the bat in the beginning. So, since you were the original questioner, no, I'm not going to you right now. I'm enough on this topic for the moment. We got other people, but because I think I've tried to answer all three. Yeah, sure. I was born during the day, but not yesterday, baby. So I want to acknowledge to all three of you, though, that there are some answers that I give to questions where I go, like on the energy issue, I'm like, I know that that's the right answer, and I know it can be accomplished, and I know it'll be effective. I'm not sure if my answer on this is going to be effective or not, but I'll tell you this, I've listened to a lot of answers on it, and I haven't found one that I know for sure is going to be effective, because if I had, I would have adopted it. So I appreciate the question, and I appreciate your follow-ups too. Let me go back here. I keep my back to these people. I guess at least give them a question. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Governor Christie. Great to have you back in the state, and looking forward to voting for you in January
you.
and again next November. I think that this question is a little bit different, but you can tell a lot about a candidate by the way that they answer it. So who does a President Christie just have to have in his cabinet?
That's a good one. Who do I just have to have? Wow. Eaton is already putting himself out of play. Well, that would be the pat answer, right? Like that would be the total like pandering answer would be to say to Sununu. And by the way, Chris and I have been friends for 12 years. He's incredibly smart, and since he's going to be out of a job here soon, from what I've read, he'd be available. I would say there's two governors or former governors for sure that I would want. Sununu would be one of them, and Larry Hogan would be the other. Hogan's from Maryland. Just left Maryland in 2022. He was term limited out. Okay, on the aisle here, and I'll get to you.
Hello. As a voter, I'm interested in where the tire hits the asphalt, your deeds of actual accomplishments, because a lot of people talk and
We talked
blah,
about
blah,
that.
blah.
Yep.
You talked about Charles Kushner. Could you tell us, as one of your victories as an AG in Jersey back in the day, you took on this powerful person? Can you describe that? We in New Hampshire, unless we read the Times, we don't read the paper in Patterson or Newark.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that? You mentioned it briefly
About the
earlier.
Kushner case?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I'll give you the briefest summary of it I can. We were investigating. Charles Kushner is a real estate developer, and at the time was the second richest guy in New Jersey, and he was, and he is the son, of course, or the father, of course, of Jared Kushner, who at that time was not married to Ivanka Trump, but later became married to Ivanka Trump. We were investigating Charles Kushner for tax fraud and for federal election fraud, meaning donating beyond the limits to political candidates. In the course of that investigation, he ran a family-owned and run business with both his younger brother and his sister. And they came in to be questioned, and he found out about the fact that we were questioning his brother and his sister. He got angry at them for answering questions from us. He then went out and hired a prostitute for $25,000 to approach and seduce his sister's husband and to videotape that seduction. And then on the day, months later, on the day of his sister's son's engagement party, his nephew's engagement party, he had anonymously delivered to his sister's home the videotape of her husband having sex with another woman as a method of intimidating her from being involved any longer in answering questions from the prosecutors. When we discovered all of this, we then arrested him for tax fraud, federal election fraud, witness tampering, and something called the Mann Act, which is a federal statute that comes from the 1800s, which is causing a woman or man to cross state lines to commit an act of prostitution. The prostitute he had hired was from New York, and he caused her to cross state lines into New Jersey to commit that act. I'm sure it made Thanksgiving significantly more complicated, but he committed all those acts, and we prosecuted him, and he pled guilty to every count that we brought against him. And you were the AG? I was the U.S. attorney. I was the federal prosecutor who brought that case, which is why members of the Kushner family, as you might imagine, are so very fond of me in the years since then. But by the way, it was the right thing to do. And, you know, you can't do that stuff. and by the way, like, you're going to go home tonight thinking about that one going, what? That actually happened? Yes, it actually happened. And just as an aside to keep you laughing, the name of the place where she seduced him was the Red Bull Inn. Because some of the stuff, the truth is better than anything you could possibly make up for a novel. But the case got great notoriety because of who he was and how wealthy he was. But think about the fact that somebody who committed those crimes and was as wealthy as he was and still is, and could afford any lawyer and fight any case he could, pled guilty to all of the counts before we even indicted him on the criminal complaint. So I don't know if it was my best case, but it was certainly one of the more famous ones for sure. And what it showed to the people in New Jersey was that regardless of how wealthy you are, no matter who you are and who you know, when I was running things, if you broke the law, you were going to jail. And that was that. So you're welcome. All right, let's go to you right back there.
And being a prosecuting attorney, what are your thoughts on qualified immunity?
For who?
For the ones that break the law.
Yeah, well.
Like the police,
right.
Judges, lawyers.
Well, right. So with qualified immunity, this is what I'd say. For anybody other than police officers, I don't favor it. I think we all should be held responsible for what we do. I do think there are times when, with police officers, things get complicated and acts are tough to understand. I don't want to undercut police officers. Now, if they commit acts that are so heinous, they're going to be prosecuted. Qualified immunity won't, if those acts are egregious, will not protect them. So this is the ones that are in the gray area. And I think we have enough trouble right now recruiting police and keeping police in this country. And I don't want to make it harder for us to do that. And given the lawless nature of what's going on right now, I wouldn't move off of that. But for other folks, like, look, I'm a recovering lawyer. I don't think I deserve qualified immunity for anything. I think I have to be held to account for the things that I do. And by the way, I'm given an extraordinary privilege of a license to practice law and to make a living that way, at least when I used to do that. And I have to be held to the highest standard. And so I don't think it should apply for others. I think for police officers, it should, unless their conduct is so egregious that it's criminal, and then they deserve to be punished just the way any other American would be punished. Well, I think that you could pass laws to get to it, and the president has to advocate for that, and I would. All right? Yes, sir, right in front.
Thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
So my question's on Social Security.
I'm shocked. He has an AARP shirt on, so it's not. I'm not a mind reader.
So, in the title of Social Security, there is the word entitlement, but I paid into it for 50 years, working 50 years into it.
Yep.
And the money's gone into the Social Security trust. It's not part of the general budget, so it has nothing to do with balancing the budget.
Yeah, but it does, as you know, because the trust fund is nowhere near funded at the level that it needs to be, and so we've been paying out of general fund money and general fund borrowing for quite some time.
You've been paying back because you borrowed out of the trust. So
Well,
now
I
you're
didn't,
paying
but
back
someone
into
did.
the trust. So my question is how do we fix it so that it's still going to be there for these college students? And the other part of my question or my comment is, with all my retirement income, Social Security is the only one that has a cost of living increase. So when we're seeing inflation of 10%, that cost of living increase is very, very important. So how
Sure.
do we fix it so that it can be there?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't do anything with the cost of living adjustment. I think for the reasons that you state, it is supposed to be a safety net for people to make sure that people don't grow older in this country in poverty. Look, I think there's only three ways to do it, right? It's a math equation. It's a math equation. It's either retirement age, other general eligibility standards, or taxes. That's it. I mean, it's not complicated. It's ugly, and it's controversial, and it's expensive, but it's not complicated. And it's going to be broke in 11 years. And when it gets broke in 11 years, there will be a 24% automatic cut based on the law to everybody's benefits. For people who rely upon Social Security and think about what a 24% cut would mean to their lives, it is unacceptable. It can't happen. But that's why I think what Joe Biden and the folks in Congress did in his last State of the Union address is so awful. Biden stood up there and said, and can we all agree that we're not going to touch Social Security? And both sides of the room got up and applauded. A room full of liars and hypocrites. And all they're hoping is, okay, they're just hoping they're not there in 11 years. Or if they are, that you've forgotten that they wasted the years before that. So I think we got to consider raising the retirement age, but not for people in their 50s and 60s, for people in their 20s and 30s and early 40s. Now, I have an oldest child who's 30 years old. If we raise the retirement age a few years for him, and in 40 years, he can't figure out how to deal with that, I got a much bigger problem on my hands than the raising the retirement age. I also think that we need to look at means testing for it as well. Now, the question is going to be at what level? At what level of net worth do you have where people say, okay, do I really need to collect Social Security? We know that some of the ridiculous examples, like Elon Musk probably doesn't need the check. I know he's paid into it. I know Mark Zuckerberg's paid into it. I know Warren Buffett paid into it. I know that. But you know, if they miss the check, I doubt that AARP will be like picketing in favor of Warren Buffett getting his Social Security check. The question is, where do you go? And that's got to be part of a negotiation. But I think both those things have to be discussed. I wouldn't take the cap off taxes because I think that when you get from where it is now, maybe up to like $400,000, $500,000 in annual income, that the cost to those people and their ability to save for their retirement in other ways gets really impinged. So I wouldn't do that. I'd look at those other two options first. But no matter what you do, it's not going to be popular. But what will be less popular is if you let those cuts go through, because that's unconscionable. And for those like you referenced who say, rightfully, we've all paid into it. I'm 61 now. I've been paying it into it, you know. I started working full-time after I got out of law school at 24. So I don't know, right? We're 37 years now. I've been paying every other week into, I remember when our second child, our oldest daughter, got her first job, and she got told how much she would make, and then she got her first paycheck. And she called me, and she's like, Dad, I'm getting screwed here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, I mean, I know I had to pay taxes, right? I see the federal tax. She goes, who is this FICA guy? Because he's taking a lot of money from me. Like, well, that's going to be your Social Security benefit when you get to be older. And, you know, she's like, sure, great. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be there. We have to make sure that it's there. But first and foremost, for the people who are collecting now, because their lives will be thrown upside down if we don't deal with it. And we can't ignore it. We can't ignore it. And we are ignoring it, actively ignoring it. And I know, because I've been traveling around here, no one else is talking about it. None of the other candidates want to talk about it. And I remember when I talked about this 8 years ago, and I remember Trump coming up to me and he goes, hey, I read that thing you put out on Social Security and Medicare. That's pretty smart. And I said, oh, thanks, Donald. He goes, I would never do it. He goes, because it's very unpopular, so I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to go anywhere near it. I'm not going to touch it. But, you know, it's pretty smart. We got to get rid of politicians like that because it's coming home to roost. Reagan fixed it 40 years ago and took the risk that went along with it. We need a president who wants to do things of consequence. And Reagan, in his first term, not after he was safely reelected, in his first term, grabbed it and said, we're going to fix it, and made the tough decisions and negotiated with the other side. And there are parts of that bill that I don't like, and I'm sure Reagan didn't like. But what everyone likes is that for 40 years, you haven't had to worry about whether your check with your cost of living adjustment was going to be there, because it was there. And that's where I want to get to, is to make sure that that is exactly what happens. But it's not going to be without sacrifice from younger people. Sorry to say, but that's the way it goes. And in the last part is this. You know, if we ignore these kind of things and we're not honest about it, and we say we're going to fix it through some voodoo magic, it may sound good, like building a wall and having Mexico pay for it, but it doesn't happen. Now, the fact that the wall hasn't happened has ramifications for us from an immigration perspective, but not nearly as big as the ramifications will be if we're cutting people's Social Security by 24%. Then we're going to see folks who won't be able to afford to pay their rent, won't be able to afford food. And for those who say, I paid into it all these years, and no matter what, I don't want any kind of means testing because I deserve my money back, there's lots of stuff that we pay for that we don't get anything back for. I'm fortunate, Mary Pat and I are fortunate, we've never been on food stamps. But we pay for it through our taxes every year. And you know what? I willingly pay for it. I don't willingly pay for the fraud part. But for the people who really need it, I'm glad that people have the opportunity not to go to bed hungry in this country. Right? So there's some things that we pay for that we just don't get a direct benefit from. And so that's why I'm less sympathetic to the argument about I paid into the fund all along. If you've been in this country, you've been enormously successful. I mean enormously successful. Maybe that's one of the sacrifices you can make for living in the country that gave you the opportunity to be that successful. All right. All right, Quinn, let's go. It's time. Now, this was not a far drive for you, right?
It was 20 minutes. I'm
Yeah.
almost through.
I want you to know that I scheduled here for you. Because Quinn goes all over the state. If you haven't seen him on TV already, he's a TV star, national TV star. And most people don't have their town halls out here, as you know. It's more to the east. And Quinn's mom has to get in the car and drive him to wherever, because he's 15, and drive him to wherever he needs to go. So we are here tonight for you, for your 20-minute drive. So, just because you only drove 20 minutes, don't give me some lame question, okay? You still got to step up your game with a good question. So what do you got for me tonight?
Well, first of all, it's kind of hard to step up your game when it's really hard to find ideas, because whenever I have an idea, and I mentioned this to you in July, you're literally on whatever network you're on answering it. It's getting pretty hard, but
good.
Hopefully I have a good one
challenged, young man. Let's go. Let's see
it's
what
a challenge.
you got.
All right. So you have been in the race the past 3.5 months since your June 6th town hall at St. Anselm. And in order to win the primary, you need some of Trump's voters. Yet when you attack Trump, it's almost like NATO Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. And the divisions between yourself and MAGA are stronger now more than ever, especially after your Donald Dunk attack. And, don't get me wrong, it was very visually entertaining. But my question for you tonight is, how can you win over MAGA voters when your attacks only seem to be like pushing them farther away? I've asked this question multiple times, but I really think it's the really important question. So thank you so much.
Have you asked me this multiple times?
Like different forms of it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So I didn't remember this one. All right. I know I saw you on TV saying that, no, you're not going to run for office, you're going to be a journalist. Did I hear that correctly? All right. Let me answer this to you as if you weren't a journalist. I'll treat you even better than that, okay? The truth is the most important thing when you're running for office. It just is. And we all do when we run, we make strategic judgments, we calculate things to try to help our chances to improve. But if one of those calculations is, I'm not going to tell the truth about something, because if I do, it means that I'll have less of a chance to win, then I think you need to go home. So, every word I've said about Donald Trump, since the day I got into the race until tonight, I say because not only I believe, but I know, because I've known him for 22 years. I know it's true. And it needs to be talked about, Quinn. Because when we avoid talking about those things, we make ourselves lesser people. When we hide from the truth, or when we hide the truth from others, we don't, in my view, deserve to be leaders. I recognize that this is hard for me, believe me. I'm the one out here. You were at the one, I think, that we had outside behind the VFW hall where the Trump protester was screaming at me during the entire thing. Like, it's no fun. But you know what? I don't care. And I can't care. We have someone in Donald Trump who, in my opinion, does not merit having the office of President of the United States again by his own conduct. And because I know you do your homework, you know, when I dropped out in New Hampshire 8 years ago, I was the first candidate who was on that stage with him who endorsed him. Because I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president of the United States. And I knew Donald Trump was going to be the nominee. I'd been on that stage. I knew no one was beating him. So I made the decision. He wasn't my first choice. I was my first choice. But I endorsed him. I chaired his transition. I prepped him for the debates with Hillary Clinton. I chaired his Opioid and Drug Abuse National Commission while he was president. And I prepared him for the debates with Joe Biden in 2020 because I thought he'd be a better president than Joe Biden. So I'm not some never Trumper who from the beginning thought, no chance he should be president. I'm not one of those people. I didn't leave him. He left me. He left me. He left me by not telling the truth. He left me about when he lied about the 2020 election. He left me when he stood there on January 6th and told those people to go march up to Capitol Hill, and then sat in the Oval Office and watched them lay waste to parts of the Capitol and sat there for hours and did nothing about it as President of the United States. He left me. So I had no intention of running again. I really didn't. But when I saw that, and then I saw the way the race was shaping up, that no one was going to say those things for the very reason you just said. They don't want to offend anybody. Well, man, you're going to be in politics, you don't want to offend anybody? Get out. Because you're going to offend if you're going to be honest. And these last two debates, while there have been some interesting moments, in my opinion, there's only been one significant one that people will remember. And that was in the first debate, when they asked people to raise their hand if they were willing to support a convicted felon for president of the United States. And I didn't raise my hand, and I got booed by people in that audience for it. And I don't care. Because I guarantee you this, if Adams and Jefferson and Washington and Franklin had known that someone would have the audacity to be indicted for federal crimes and convicted, perhaps, they would have put, after 35 years of age and natural-born citizen in the United States as requirements for the presidency, they would have added, and not a convicted felon. But they never thought that anybody would be so self-consumed, so self-important, that they would put themselves ahead of their country and ask to be president. Now, I know all those things don't help my poll numbers with certain people. But fine, they got an option. Vote for Trump. I'm not telling you can't. It's a free country. Vote for him if you want to. Knowing everything you know. Put him back behind the desk in the Oval Office. Knowing everything you know. Put him in charge of who's going to be in charge of our government. Knowing everything you know. Put him in charge of the strongest military the world's ever seen. It's going to be your call. But what I will tell you is this, from the tactical perspective. The last poll, two polls I saw here in New Hampshire, Trump was at 34% and 38%. That means that between 62 and 66% of the Republicans in New Hampshire want somebody else. So, let's just say I'm being tactical, which you know I'm not. But let's say I were. Do you want to fish for votes in the 38% pond, where a lot of other people are doing it, or in the 62% pond, where very few people are doing it? I'll fish in the 62% pond. Now, those people have to show up and vote, and they have to be honest too, and they have to stand by what they believe in. And I have to make sure that I give them reasons to vote for me. But I said this to someone today who called me, who was talking about supporting another candidate. And it was one of the candidates who raised their hand. And this guy hates Donald Trump, this potential supporter of mine. Hates him, but said, I don't know if I can be with you. I want to be with this other person. And I said, well, you know that that other person raised their hand on the stage and said they'd support him if he was a convicted felon. I said, yeah, I know, but maybe I could overlook that. That's the problem, man. So I'd rather go home telling the truth than to get the job by lying to you. So this is it. maybe people won't vote for me because of it. But guess what? When I talk to people, and I met this woman at a restaurant in Manchester. She's like in her mid-70s. She came over to me, and I was eating lunch, and she said to me, "Can I just interrupt you for one moment?" And I said, "Sure." And then she like leaned over like this, and she's like, "Get Trump, he's really bad. You're the only one doing it. Go get him, go get him." And I said to her, "Okay, but why are you whispering?" New Hampshire doesn't whisper. You better not. You are given an enormous privilege in this country. You get to go first. You go first. You are the presidential wine tasters of America. You open the bottle. You taste it first and you decide, does this taste presidential or doesn't it? All right. You may have made a mistake 8 years ago. I forgive you. But don't do it again. You've got an obligation to come to these things, to listen to all the candidates, to show up and vote, and to make sure you get everybody else, except for you, because you can't vote. But you can't either. But nonetheless, you guys have an obligation to do this and to make sure you're honest about it. So that's why I get it. I know that some of it's hard, but if you think this is hard, wait till you get behind the desk in the Oval Office. That's hard. Because then you have the lives of 330 million people on your shoulders. And every decision you make every day is going to be a hell of a lot harder than whether you tell the truth about Donald Trump or not. And if folks don't want to vote for me because they disagree with me, that's what America's all about. But I'm never going to let them not vote for me because I lied to them. And I won't do it. Thanks for the question. All right. Now, my staff just told me I could take one more question. And usually I say two. But tonight, given this weather and the fact that I have to fly back, I'm really only taking one. All right? So I'm going to give it to you right there. Wait for the microphone.
Okay, I believe you've been a proponent to the PBM's reform. If you became president, would you want to push that national? And you might want to explain that to people.
Okay, so PBMs are pharmacy benefit managers. They manage the benefit you either get from the government or the insurance, your insurance company, for prescription drugs. And in my opinion, they are the biggest part of the problem in the cost of prescription drugs. Here's why. I know what everybody else does in that chain. The pharmaceutical company invents the drug and manufactures it. The pharmacy interacts with you, gives you advice, sells you your prescription. The pharmacy benefit manager is the middleman between those. And like most middlemen, in my view, they perform very little service and get a lot of money. And let me tell you how big the money is. That when a new drug comes out, the pharmaceutical companies usually give rebates anywhere between 30 and up to 60% of the cost, the list price of the drug. They're meant for you. You know who gets it? The pharmacy benefit manager gets most of it. They skim most of it off the top, and you get a very small cut of that savings. So what do you think when you go to the pharmacy? Well, you know that your local pharmacist isn't shafting you. So you're like, well, it must be the pharmaceutical company. Now, we'll get to them in a minute. They are not without blame, but at least they provide something. So yes, what I did in New Jersey, one of the things, I was the first state in the country to do it. I said, I hate these guys. So let's go squeeze them. So we said, if you want our business for our state plan, and that was, we had 60,000 employees in the state government. So it was a lot of money, billions of dollars. You've got to participate in what's called a reverse auction. You come in, you bid, another one bids, and then I go back to them and say, no, bid lower. and they got to go back down, or they can drop out and not do it. Think about it. Now, it was 60,000 employees, so it's different scope than, let's say, here in New Hampshire. But in our first year, you know what we saved just by doing that? $500 million. Think about how much money they're making if they're willing to take our business for $500 million less than what we paid them the year before. Now, I think it's up to 24 other states in the country now do what we do, what we did in New Jersey. We were the first ones to do it. I think it's now up to 25 of the 50 states do it. And every governor who asked me about it, because we were the first ones to do it, I tell them, Republican or Democrat, keep doing it. The reason I know it's a really good idea is because my successor, who is one of the most liberal Republicans in America, Republican Democrats in America, he kept it. He kept it. He didn't turn it around. We need to do that nationally. They're making tens of billions of dollars a year literally for pushing paper and transporting medicine. That's it. We can do that much better and much cheaper. Now, on the pharmaceutical companies, let me say this. They have done a lot of great things in our country and created a lot of medicines that help keep all of us upright and healthier. But can we please stop with the commercials? Right? Like, I mean, does anybody here who loves the commercials and say, like, raise your hand, don't be afraid. Or like you look forward to the next pharmaceutical commercial? I mean, they're spending billions of dollars on this. Like, my wife hates when I do this, but I'm gonna do it. There is not a guy in America left over 55 who doesn't know there's a little blue pill you could take if you want. You don't need to advertise it anymore. We get it, we know it's available, we know we go to the doctor, we know. And how about all these other drugs that I don't even know what they do? Like they're starting to tell you, you need this drug, and go to your doctor and ask for the drug. And then they tell you all the things that could happen to you, right? Well, you could kill yourself, you could fall over of a heart attack. These are all known complications. I'm like, I don't need to hear this stuff. That's what I go to my doctor for. I go to my doctor, I say, this hurts or I don't feel good. They take tests, they look at me and go, you need this drug. And I go, I don't say, wait a second. I saw 3 other drugs on TV that why don't you reconsider that, doc? And he or she'll look at me and go like, and you went to medical school where exactly? Like, so one of the ways that the pharmaceutical companies can lower their prices is, I would tell you this, I would say if you want to participate in the Medicare program in this country, no commercials. No commercials. Huh? It used to be illegal. Then they made it legal. Guess what? I'm going back. I'm going back to the future. I don't want the commercials anymore. I don't want to see them. I don't know anything about them because you know what they're doing? I don't think they're making us any smarter. In fact, they may make us a little dumber because then the most dangerous person in the world, of course, is someone who thinks they know something, a little something about something that's really complicated. And it's causing us to be more expensive. We do those 2 things, we will lower prescription drug prices in this country and not cripple the pharmaceutical industry by setting prices and making us as bad as Canada or England where you can't find these medicines. Remember, we get all the medicines first in this country because we invent most of them. And we spend most of the money in the research to develop them. Well, that's great. I want to continue to do that, but I don't want to have to pay the exorbitant prices for them. And there are ways that we can do it without affecting research and development at all by getting rid of advertising and getting rid of the PBMs. And I want to tell you, I am so glad I picked you because it's such a great question and nobody ever asks it. And most of the time when I go for a last question, it's something really bad and I leave the room going, oh God, why did I pick that person? I'm gonna fly home by myself because I picked you and you asked that question. That was a great question. First of all, let me thank you for coming out on a really nasty, rainy night to spend time with me on a Friday night. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody's questions, but you never can. but I'll be back a lot. And I got to come back out here because I can't make you be driving all those hours to bring this guy to every one of these meetings. But let me just finish by saying this. I want your vote. All right? President Bush, 43, said to me one time when I was getting ready to run for governor the first time, and I'd been U.S. attorney under his administration for 7 years. And then when I was getting ready to run for governor, I called President Bush. He had just left office. And I said to him, I'm running for governor for the first time. Like, do you have any advice for me? And he said, yeah, I got advice for you. He goes, don't forget to ask for the vote. He said, people like to be asked for their vote. Don't think they just assume you want it. Ask them. And I said, well, that's really great advice, Mr. President. And I said, thank you for that. And he goes, yeah, what would I know? I only won it twice. And so I'm asking you for your vote. I need your help. I need your support. What Quinn said is absolutely right. We are a party right now that's fighting with each other. That's okay. I want a big party that fights with each other. We need to have different opinions. And not everybody should be agreeing on everything. That would be a really boring party, and I don't think it would be a very effective one. So I don't mind that we have people with different opinions in the party who want to argue with each other, but elections are where we make decisions. You want a president, once again, who actually will get the job done. And I did it in one of the toughest blue states as a conservative Republican. And nobody else on that stage can say that, including the former president. And the other thing I'll take, because when he was in Washington, he didn't get a whole lot of it done. Talked a lot about it, but didn't get it done. I want you to remember the late 70s. I was just going to college in the fall of 1980. Double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates, double-digit unemployment, hostages in Iran, and the Soviet army in Afghanistan. And a president of the United States who told us it was our fault. We had a national malaise. And it really wasn't his fault, it was ours. And that's when I was starting college. I was a freshman. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? What kind of future am I going to have? And I sat in my dorm room in October of 1980. I turned 18 years old in September. And I got to vote for the first time. And I grabbed my absentee ballot and I voted for Ronald Reagan because he gave me hope. And the reason he gave me hope was not just what he said, but because there's a guy who had been a Republican in California. I've been the governor for 2 terms in California and got things done. I thought if anybody can fix this stuff, maybe it's him. Maybe he's going to give me hope. And by the time he was done with being president, I was a first-year lawyer in 1988. And the world was completely different because of one man and what he did to lead the country. We have a lot of those same problems now. And maybe it's time once again to go back to that old formula that worked. Let's get a conservative Republican governor from a blue state who knows how to get things done and won't just talk about this stuff, but will actually go to Washington and do it. If you give me your vote, that's exactly what I'm going to do. It will start here in New Hampshire. And if you do it, New Hampshire is going to look like the smartest state in America, man. I guarantee you. Thanks for having me tonight.